Okay. Well, good evening and welcome to the Diversity in Medicine Advocacy Training by AMSNY. Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm going to give it over to Erin to kick it off.
Hi guys, my name is Erin Clark. I work with the communication firm that handles public relations for AMSNY. So anytime there's a press opportunity, which we'll discuss later on in this training, you'll likely be dealing with me or one of my other two colleagues. But we put together this training to explain to you what advocacy, which includes press opportunities, means and what it means for you and also AMSNY. And we hope you'll find it useful, and we hope you'll want to volunteer for some of these opportunities. So on the right side is kind of a table of contents of what's going to be in this presentation. It's going to be about 30 minutes long, and then we're hoping that there's a bit of time at the end if you guys have any questions. If you don't have any questions, we'll offer you some email addresses that you can reach out to someone else at your leisure if you do. So without further ado, we'll go on.
So my name is Jenny Tassler. I'm the Director of Government Relations and External Affairs here at AMSNY. And I see some familiar names and faces. I'm the person you deal with at AMS when anything comes to advocacy and legislation. So a lot of what we do at AMSNY is advocacy based. We focus on trying to ensure that the priorities of the medical schools are priorities at both the state, the federal, and the city level in New York City. So to that end, the Diversity in Medicine program is a top priority for our organization. As you know, we oversee the Diversity in Medicine program and scholarship, which is funded through the state budget. And so we do a lot of advocacy around the program and the importance of diversifying the physician workforce. So advocacy in general is using your voice to enact change, both at a legislative or policy level. And what we do at AMSNY, we're constantly engaging with legislators and policymakers to try to further our goals. We focus on a number of issues, including biomedical research, and as we said, diversity. So to that end, we also engage you, the students, and we do this because you are the voices that matter. It is your voice that makes the biggest impact on the legislators that we talk to on a daily basis. And so we wanted to let you know about some of the ways that you can engage with us and become an advocate for these programs. And this is important, especially because whether you know it or not, you are already an advocate, and you will continue to be an advocate throughout your career as a physician. You advocate for yourself, for your profession, for your patients, and for your communities. So we're excited to offer you these opportunities and to engage with you to make your voice heard. So a lot of what we do at AMS, again, is ongoing throughout the year. But we do have a lot of opportunities where we will be doing what we call action alerts, where we'll be reaching out to you and asking you to do something to advocate for particularly these programs. And a lot of the things you can do don't take a tremendous amount of time or effort. We really try to customize and make it easy for you to engage. And if you want to engage more, we have other opportunities as well. So some of the things we might do are things like sending a customized letter through Rally Congress, which is a platform we use to send letters to legislators. And you'll go on a link, it'll take you to a template. We'll have, you can put in your address and it'll format the letter and send it to your local electeds. We do ask that you customize these letters because the most important thing is that the legislators are hearing your personal experience. That's what makes the impact and makes them want to support these programs. Another thing you can do is meet with your legislators. We do this throughout the year on a usually virtual basis now. We used to do this much more in person. And you can do this as well. If you're interested in meeting with your legislators, we certainly encourage that, and we can facilitate at AMSNY. We can let you know who they are. We can help you set up a meeting. We're happy to go with you. If you feel comfortable doing it on your own, you can do that as well. And then we also have opportunities throughout the year where we host advocacy events. Our biggest one is usually in March. This year, it's going to be March 1st, where we have a whole day devoted to the diversity in medicine programs and advocating for it. And you'll go with a group of students to meetings. the virtually right now, and you can tell the elected officials what this program has meant to you, how it has impacted your life, and why they should support it. There's also a wide range of other options, and I'll let Erin tell you a little bit more about the social media.
So social media is something that I'm sure that all of you guys are already doing. You know how to use Twitter, you know how to use Facebook and several other social media applications. But for the purposes of AMSNY, the organization typically posts to Facebook and Twitter. So when we say that you can contribute through social media, we mean simply just retweeting any content that is posted on social media. Or if you feel like doing a little bit more, then using your personal story to go ahead and post original content on social media. And then if we can go to the next slide, there are a couple of heavier lift tasks that we say here, and these more directly involve being interviewed and media. So the first thing would be being interviewed for a blog post or an op-ed. And for that, you wouldn't be interviewed by a member of the media. You'd actually be interviewed by me, or again, one of the other two colleagues that I work with on this account. And what we would do is either set up some type of interview with you over the phone or over Zoom, Skype, whatever is your preferred method. And we'd ask you a couple of questions, basically some background about you, why you want to become a doctor, anything about your journey as a doctor or getting to become a doctor. And then after that, we handle everything. We would write either a blog post using your information and then pass that along to you to make sure that it's all accurate. And then that would be approved by AMSNY. And then it would go up on AMSNY's website. AMSNY over the time has curated a couple of different blog posts from students, from scholarship recipients, from those who are alum now and are on to their careers. Very similar to that, we also write op-eds for our clients, and you would be a client of ours through extension of AMSNY. And so just like I said with the blog post, we would interview you, ask you a couple of questions, and then we'd write an op-ed. An op-ed is an editorial or opinion piece that's often posted in either a newspaper, I should say published in a newspaper, or posted on an online outlet. Outlets that I can think of off the top of my head that you may have read an opinion piece in would be the New York Times, also AM New York, and many other, the Daily News. We've posted some for students and scholarship recipients in the Daily News most recently. And so that would be the first opportunity. The second would be to participate in an interview with the media. And that could be a television interview or a radio interview. Sometimes we do podcasts as well. And if you've never done something like this before and you are interested in doing this, rest assured that we wouldn't just, throw you into the fire. One of the things that my firm does is prepare what's called a briefing memo. And that is a document that we give anyone who we work with that's going to be meeting with press. The document has information, background information about you, background information about the show that you would be on, and the person that would be interviewing you. And also, most importantly, we prepare a list of suggested questions. These are questions that either the reporter will ask you directly or they'll use as a guide. But it's best for you to know what you're prepared or be prepared for what you're going to be asked. And then we also give you talking points. So the talking points, you can either have them next to you if you're doing a virtual interview, something like this, and you can look at them and use them for reference. Or if you're doing this in person, which a lot of media is starting to go back to in-person interviews, then you can just hold a piece of paper printed with these talking points below your chest, and you can look at that for reference. We'll go on to the next one, Callie. So why is advocacy important? Well, like Jenny alluded to earlier, this allows you to tell your story, and your stories are most effective in helping AMSNY's programs continue, helping AMSNY get money for these programs so that more students can benefit from the programs and the scholarships that you guys have. It gives the program a voice as well. We can talk about the program as much as we'd like, but as Jenny alluded to earlier, When an elected official hears from someone who is actually benefiting from the program, it really makes an impact. And so we want to give you guys the best information we can so that you can be prepared to give the voice a program. And then I'll leave the last part to Jenny, which she's actually touched on a bit.
Sure. So again, all of these actions inform elected officials both about our programs, about what our programs do, and how they impact their constituents. And again, meeting with the legislator, directly engaging with the legislator is extremely important, but the media also is very important. Legislators are constantly reading their local newspapers, hearing what's happening in Albany. And so all of this work helps us advocate for these programs. And when it comes down to it, helps them know where their dollars are going and makes them want to support our programs. Next slide.
So how you can help. As mentioned before, you can share social media content. So you can just simply press a button and retweet or repost anything that AMSNY is posting on Facebook or Twitter. Then you can post original content to social media, which we talked about. And then the last one is volunteer for interviews that I just spoke about, press opportunities, and as Jenny mentioned earlier, for trips to meet local legislators.
I should also say the action alerts will sometimes send out emails, blasts asking for things like photos or videos or information. Even just responding to that and letting us know a little tidbit about something would be extremely helpful.
So to piggyback off of that, when Jenny is saying that sometimes the action alerts will ask for video or pictures, it may be a picture of you holding a sign simply that says why you want to become a doctor, or why AMSNY's programs are important to you. We've done that in the past and they're quite effective. It's just someone snapping a photo of you holding a piece of paper in your hand in front of your chest, and it says, I want to become a doctor because, or I want to serve underserved communities because. And that's another kind of, light lift that you can do. So if we move on to the next slide, we want to just take a couple of minutes to share a couple of examples of what your advocacy in the form of press looks like. So the first one we've mentioned probably now for you guys ad nauseum is reposting relevant content on Twitter and Facebook. So we don't need to give you examples of that. You guys all know. But the second thing that we'll show you is an example of an op-ed in which we sat down. Actually, one of my colleagues interviewed Samantha Williams, who is attending Syracuse Upstate Medical University, and then wrote an op-ed based on Samantha's experience. The next one is very similar, as I mentioned to you before. Someone interviewed Dr. Virginia Ramos before she graduated from the program and wrote a blog post. That blog post, and actually all of these media clips is what we call them, live on AMSNY's website. So at your leisure, you can go back and look at these, but we will show them to you. The next one on our list here is a profile piece that was done about Dr. Akia Myrie, who is now going through her residency at the Cleveland Clinic. She's of Jamaican descent, and so the Caribbean Life did a profile story on her. For this instance, instead of Akia being interviewed by the reporter simply sent a list of about 5 to 6 questions. Why did Akia want to become a doctor? What kind of challenges did she face in her journey to becoming a doctor, etc. She filled those out, and then based on those questions and answers, an article was written. So there's a couple of ways that these either print or online outlets can do these interviews. Then a more what you guys might know as traditional news stories are those by News 12. There was a story about Dr. Mendy Bossicot. And then also, if you feel comfortable and you are bilingual, there are also opportunities to work with predominantly the Spanish-speaking, Spanish language, either news stations, TV news stations, or even the print newspapers. And then the last example we're going to show you is a radio interview with WBAI interview in which Dr. Rafael Hernandez was interviewed. So we won't show you the entire stories for the broadcast ones, but again, we just want you to get an idea of what these would look like. So I think, there we go. So as I mentioned, all of these press clips live on AMSNY's website. So you can go to AMSNY's website and click under the tab that says news. And when you bring that down, it'll give you three options. And the left-hand option gives you really all of the press. Thank you, Callie. So the recent news option gives you all of the press clippings. And under the lens in the middle is actually the blog. So all of the blog posts are there. But if we can go back to Samantha's op-ed, Callie will scroll slowly on this. And this is an op-ed that, again, a colleague of mine interviewed Samantha, asked her a couple of questions. And then again, there's nothing else that you guys have to do after that. We actually write these stories and then we come back to you, ask about the accuracy of these. And then we do all the heavy lifting of pitching this to a newspaper. The newspaper up in Syracuse is the Syracuse Post Standard. We pitched it and they took it and ran it. And as Jenny said, local legislators read these things. And so maybe you're not speaking to a legislator yourself, but they're reading this, they're hearing your voice, they're hearing your experience and understanding and learning why these programs are important. This is the blog post about Virginia Ramos. Virginia was interviewed by my colleague, and then very similar to the op-ed, a story was written, a blog post that lives on AMSNY's website. This was not published in any newspaper or online outlet. The blog post is exclusively for AMSNY's website. Sometimes these are reposted in newsletters that are sent out to supporters of AMSNY. This clip is the Caribbean life story that was written about Akia. And again, a couple of questions asked to her, and then the reporter went ahead and wrote a story. And again, not to bore you guys, we're not going to read all of these, and Callie is scrolling through them very quickly, but if you'd like to, you're more than welcome to go back and look at these so you have a better idea of what these stories would be and what you would be doing, the information you'd be giving. The next link that Callie's going to click on for us is the News 12 story. So this, we are going to play just a couple of seconds of it so you can get an idea of what an interview would look like.
Against the coronavirus continues. Medical students have been stepping up to the front lines. Heroes making their way from a virtual graduation straight into hospitals. I spoke with one medical student who explained why she didn't think twice when she was asked to use what she had learned to help others.
I figured there was no other place I could be.
Mindy Balsico recovered from having the coronavirus herself, graduated from Stony Brook last week, and headed right into battle.
We have been really key, I think, in communicating with families.
Keeping those forced to leave their loved ones in the hospital informed, because she knows firsthand how much a phone call like that could mean.
We have my aunt right now, and she has COVID-19, so she's suffering at Columbia Hospital in the city. And, you know, we have a big family, and it tears us, honestly, that we can't be at her side right now.
Making those.
So one thing I want to take a second to point out about Mindy's story is that it was done completely remotely. It was done virtual. But as I mentioned earlier in the training, a lot of reporters, broadcast reporters in particular, are going back to shooting their interviews and doing their stories in person. So with the next example, which also happens to be a story that was done by New York One Noticias, which is the Spanish language arm of New York One. This one was done pre-COVID and in person, and this would be what interviews nowadays would look more like. You can just click the ask later.
Cuando tenía 5 años, Jaime Nieto vio a su madre morir por falta de cuidado médico.
La llevaron a un hospital, pero no hubo muchas intervenciones y después de 2 semanas murió en el hospital.
Esa experiencia lo motivó a estudiar medicina. Jaime llegó de Colombia con visa de estudiante cuando tenía 19 años. Trabajó como jornalero, repartidor de comida y jardinero para pagar la universidad. Cuando Jaime se graduó de biología en Mercy University, no tenía dinero y tampoco sabía qué hacer para entrar a la escuela de medicina.
Afortunadamente, el no saber el proceso.
So if you guys notice here, it's clear that Dr. Jaime Nieto is being interviewed in person. What the reporter would most likely do is either meet you at school, Sometimes they may meet you at home or some agreed upon location. And most likely the interviews are not going to be just with you. For this interview, because it was in Spanish, only Dr. Nieto was interviewed, but actually New York One, the actual New York One, the English speaking station, the reporter did the interviews in English and Spanish, and AMSNY's president and CEO, Joe Wiederhorn, was there. So for the English interview, both Joe and Dr. Nieto were interviewed. So usually when you do an interview for AMSNY, it's not just going to be you. If it's a TV interview, someone else from AMSNY is going to be there. Also, myself or my other two colleagues as the PR professionals are also there to kind of hold your hand, figuratively speaking. So if you have any questions about what you should say, what you shouldn't say, if you draw a blank, we're always there to help you. So you have a tremendous amount of support if you do volunteer to do these things. And then the last link we have here is for the radio interview. We're not going to play too much of it because it's kind of boring looking at just a slate here, but very similar to the TV interview, someone is interviewed by a radio station. These interviews are usually done via the phone, or very rarely do you actually have to go into a radio studio. So either over the phone, sometimes over Zoom. You may be on camera, you may not be, but because they're radio interviews, your face is not going to be shown. It's just the audio. So we'll just play a couple of seconds of this one so you have an idea.
We do want to thank the Associated Medical Schools of New York for putting us in touch with Dr. Hernandez, and we're now happy to welcome Dr. Rafael Hernandez back to WBAI. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Jeff, how are you? Thank you for having me.
So how have you been?
Thank you, Callie. So bear with us. We are almost finished here, guys. The next couple of slides will move through fairly quickly because they are do's and don'ts of what we are asking and would hope for you to do if you do volunteer with us. So in any of this advocacy, whether it's meeting with someone in person, whether it's being interviewed for a blog post, an op-ed, whether it's being interviewed, we're asking you to give personal experiences because as we've said, personal experiences are really what hit with those who are supporting us or who are potential supporters. If you are retweeting or reposting on Facebook or posting original content, please always tag and at AMSNY. And for Facebook and Twitter, the handles are exactly the same, AMSN, AMS New York. If possible, if you know your elected official and they are on Twitter and or Facebook, many of them are on Twitter, not all on Facebook, go ahead and tag them as well. And it's also a good idea if you're uncertain to check with someone from AMSNY, who your elected official may be, or if it's okay, depending on the content, to tag an elected official in this. And again, at the end of this, we'll give you some resources, and some of those resources are email addresses for Jenny and another person from AMSNY that you can always reach out to. Oftentimes, AMSNY runs campaigns. And with those campaigns are attached approved hashtags. Right now, we're running a campaign in which we're using the hashtag more diverse doctors, or more diverse docs, I should say. And then every Thursday, we're actually posting some of those examples, previous stories that were run about AMSNY grads, scholarship recipients, etc. And so we're using the hashtag TBT for that, which I know you guys all know what TBT is. So always a good idea to either check or just go through AMSNY's Twitter or Facebook and see if there are hashtags that are being used, and you can use that. And then we just ask that you stay on message. It's, first of all, especially with Twitter and Facebook, we all know that there's a character requirement, there's a character restriction. And so if you go on and ramble, then you can't post the most important personal experiences. But we're also asking you to be very specific in what you're talking about and stay on message about the things that we're talking about. Advocate for the programs, advocate for more funding for diversity in medicine programs. Talk about why these programs are important to you, why you want to become a doctor. And then the don'ts, we're going to go through those really quickly because I feel like you guys definitely know this. It probably goes without saying, but we have to say it. So just stay away from profanity or anything that can be considered profanity. Try your hardest not to be negative, and don't make up stories. Just use your personal experience and all will be fine. And then on to the last slide. Here are a couple of resources. As I mentioned, the last one are the contact info, email addresses for Jenny and also for Bertil. And then we'll start from the top again. AMSNY's website is there, www.amsny.org. Don't worry if you don't get an opportunity to write these down, especially the Raleigh Congress web address there. It's kind of small and it's long. This is being recorded, as we mentioned to you in the beginning, and so this will be available. And I think that you guys will also all get a link. So never fear, you'll be able to do that. And then also we've provided with you, it's dropped in the chat, and will be emailed to you as well if you registered for this training, tips for recording a good cell phone video. Now, we know you guys all probably are quite adept at knowing how to shoot a video or take a picture on a cell phone. But just in case, when we ask for AMSNY students, advocates, anyone to do something, especially if it's video or photography, there are just a couple of tips that we ask that you follow. Usually we'll send out, in addition to these tips, a script for you to say something similar to each other, something that's on message. So we've dropped that tip for recording a good cell phone video in there. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask us. So it is 6:30 on the dot right now. We are done with the formal part of the presentation. So we'll just open up the floor if you guys have any questions. And if you don't, that's also okay.
I'm just wondering who would be the best person to contact if you're interested in potentially being interviewed, or I guess moving forward with that process.
So reach out to Jenny or Bertil, and then they'll put you in contact with me. I can drop my email address in here, but your first point of contact is going to be Jenny or Bertil. So just chat with them, and then whatever opportunities come up, we will keep you in mind and reach out to you first and foremost.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I have a quick question. Sorry, well, let's put it on camera. So if we're in residency, in terms of, because it's not with the medical school, I'm sure like the residency programs are aware of these things in terms of like, is there a clearance process that have to go through our hospital system if we're interested?
So that's a great question. Natasha, right? Okay, sometimes people don't have a different name on here, so I didn't want to call you the wrong name. So that's a great question, and thanks for asking it. So as the PR professional, that's my job. So if you do want to do something with media, then you would reach out to Jenny, as I just told Robert. And then once we identify the opportunity, then we go ahead and we reach out to the PR department. You're not even CC'd on that email. You don't have to see the back and forth of that. That's like, you know, how the sausage is made. And then usually the PR departments from the med schools will say that they're game. They may give us some requirements. Very few times they say that, you know, they don't want to partake in this opportunity. So that's nothing that you really have to worry about.
And I'll just point out from our perspective, we really encourage people who are out of school to participate in our advocacy. I mean, I think, you know, the clip that we put up with Dr. Jaime Nieto, he was one of the very first post-bac classes. So, you know, we want people across the spectrum because these voices are important to hear long-term. Even if you're not still in New York, you know, that's really important to hear about, like how this impacted you, how it changed your trajectory, what are you doing now? These stories make a difference to the legislators. It's not just about when you're in school or if you're in the post-bac. We want everybody to participate. One of the strengths of the program is how long-term it has been and how successful it's been. So showing that through a range of stories is excellent.
And just to piggyback off of what Jenny said there, it's really important to have folks volunteering for these opportunities who are at different stages in their journey, because every once in a while, there are opportunities to tell the story through a timeline. So one of the press pitches that we're working on now is for a program called Mentoring in Medicine. Not sure if any of you guys, okay, so you shake your head, you're familiar with that program. So as you probably know, Mentoring in Medicine works with junior high school, middle school students, up through high school students. And then we found a student who is going through an AMSNY program. So now in college, medical school. And so we're pitching a public affairs show to talk about this timeline to talk about the need for pipeline programs throughout a medical journey, not just when you're getting ready to go into medical school. Great.
I'll say another good point for us to get in contact with you is right around the match. We try to, pitch stories throughout the year. We do sometimes white coat ceremony stories or match results stories, things like that, key points in the academic pipeline that we find ways to engage with our legislators. Okay. Well, I just wanted to remind you of a few things about our process. So at the beginning of the year starts the new legislative session. And for us, this is a very busy time because it starts the state budget process, which runs from January through March. So we'll be probably sending you a lot of emails between that time. And we would appreciate any feedback you can give us. But we also want to remind you of a few key dates. We will be running a letter writing campaign, probably late January, early February. We haven't decided yet. It depends on when the governor releases her budget. And again, we are hosting our Diversity Advocacy Day on March 1st. And I'll send these all out in an email and you'll get lots of reminders, but really do consider participating. We definitely prepare you beforehand. It won't be anything more stressful than talking about yourself. So, which can be stressful sometimes, but it shouldn't be. You should all be very proud and share.
Well, if you guys don't have any more questions, we won't hold you for much longer, but just wanted to thank you for hopping on and giving us a little bit of your evening. And I hope to see and communicate with a few, if not all of you guys in the near future. You guys are welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.